humanitarian effort.
Good morning. My name is John Kahler. I'm a pediatrician, and I'm here representing the Syrian American Medical Society. This story isn't about them, though. This story is a short story on one man's transition to much more humanness. Not to the level of humanitarian, but to the level of more human. Can I have the first slide, please? I spent the last 25 years of my life traveling from Africa through Latin America, Central America, spent a lot of times in Mexico, and a lot of times in Haiti on short to medium term missions, 2 to 4 weeks, sometimes 6 weeks. Put a lot of my intellect into that, put a lot of my heart into it, but if I were to be honest with myself, there was very little soul involved in that, and there was way too much ego involved in that. But little did I know that all of that was about to change. The next slide, please. In 2013, the Syrian regime gassed a suburb of Damascus called Ghouta. In November of 14, 60 Minutes rebroadcast the segment that they did on that. Anywhere between 500 and 1,750 people were killed. Anywhere between 500 and 600 children were killed. The last segment of that 60 Minutes segment was set in a warehouse about the size of this auditorium, with the bodies lined cord-like next to each other, all covered in white muslin. The last segment of that last segment was of a father beseeching the heavens in front of 5 small muslin-covered, silk-covered bodies, beseeching the heavens as to why this would have happened to him. While watching that, something rent in my soul. That was 1.5 years ago, and I still wake up twice a week with those nightmares of that scene. With that, I contacted the Syrian American Medical Society and was the first non-Syrian American to join it. The Syrian diaspora is now 10 million strong. It didn't begin with the revolution. It began in the 70s and 80s and 90s when the first Assad permitted anybody who wanted to leave. This is when your doctors and your dentists and your engineers left Syria for very successful work in the West. It did 2 things. It got potential troublemakers out of Syria, and it got money sent back into Syria. Can I have the next slide, please? The first wave of refugees started after the 2011-2012 violence revolution began in the end of the Arab Spring, and people walked out. So they walked across desert to Jordan, to Lebanon, and to Turkey, where they were received with various degrees of animosity. I went to all of those camps. Huge camp in Jordan, 150,000 people, well established. Now it's almost like a little city. Lebanon and Turkey, much more community integrated, but community integrated means most services were denied. So the people are really, really suffering. The second wave began after our government's lack of response to the 2013 bombing, and people started the land trips were stopped, and people started to take the route you look at there across the sea to Greece, and then hopefully up into Europe. I was in Greece with them. Next slide, please. I was in Greece with them when the border was closed. So I was at the Macedonia-Greece border when the border was closed in an itinerant camp developed of 18,500 people at Idmini. Now, for the first week, there was an assumption the border was going to reopen. Obviously, it never did. And as soon as it was clear that it wasn't going to happen, more violence started. The government finally shut the camp down and set up more permanent camps, which still exist to this day. Something else happened, though, while I was in Greece, and that was the death 1 year ago today the death of what was considered to be, or what was called, the last pediatrician in East Aleppo. Mohammed Mas was killed in a barrel bomb of his hospital. He, 2 other healthcare workers, and 20 patients. This was the second sole Syrian event. I have 6 children, I have 12 grandchildren, I had a pediatric practice for 30-some years, and the thought of that touched me like I've never been touched before. And I contacted my execs at the Syrian American Medical Society, and I said, please send me to Aleppo. 3 things can happen. I'm non-Syrian. What better person to bear witness, direct physical witness, to the devastation that's happening in East Aleppo. By that time, the siege has been ongoing for 4 years. I'm sorry, for 3 years, and the attacks on health facilities happened every day. So I could both bear witness, I could stand in physical solidarity with the real heroes in this story, which are the Syrian medical people, and I could actually deliver some health care. After much wrangling, next slide please. After much wrangling, we were permitted to do this. This should say obviously June 2016. After much wrangling, Dr. Smeritar, to my right, is an orthopedic surgeon, Syrian American, born in Chicagoland. To my left is Dr. Zahir Salul. Some of you here remember him. He spoke a couple of years ago. He is the true lion of Aleppo. He is an unbelievable humanitarian. Both of them are 2 of the most selfless physicians I've ever met in my life. This was the hospital where Dr. Mas worked. Behind me, which you can't see, is a door. You can see the door jamb. On that, there was a memorial that I had the absolute privilege of writing my own little farewell, essentially. Next slide, please. This is the entrance to M10, which was the major trauma unit in East Aleppo. The siege was of East Aleppo. West Aleppo was open. There were 400,000 people there. There's been probably 500,000 people killed since the revolution began. 800 healthcare workers about. And most of these healthcare workers were not killed by accident. Most of these healthcare workers and these facilities were targeted. So these are war crimes, and hopefully the devil will get his due on this one. But anyway, this is the entrance to M10 on the day we got there. The picture on the other side is exactly the same picture, exactly the same site, 3 months after the first picture. This is what happens when the hospital was bombed out. This isn't just from barrel bombs. Barrel bombs were designed by this regime to do damage and kill people and hurt structures. But our facility was 20 meters underground and was hit by what are called bunker buster bombs. And this is what happens. This is when this hospital was put out. I'm going to put a bookmark at this part of the story because obviously this narrative is not done. The war continues. 2 of our doctors were killed in the past week. By our doctors, I mean Sam's doctors, were killed in Syria. And this part of my personal narrative is not done, and certainly the narrative of the war isn't finished. So I'd like to take the last couple of minutes to talk about the refugees, because that was the second transformative part of my life, coming in contact with refugees. Could I have the next slide, please? Don't play it.
Home by Warren Shire.
So, thank you. There's probably 9 million displaced people in Syria, 4.5 million displaced in country, 4 million official refugees registered out of country, another 1 to 2 unofficial. And so people say, and that's just the Syrians. There were 5,000 drowned refugees from Syria and North Africa last year in the Aegean and the Mediterranean. 5,000. And people say to me, well, why do you do this work? And I've hunted for an answer. I've said because it affects me. I've said a whole bunch of other things. But what I'm about to play for you answers that question better than any answer I could ever give you. So now, please, next slide.
Home by Warren Shire. No one leaves home. Unless home is the mouth of a shark. You only run for the border when you see the whole city running as well. Your neighbors running faster than you, breath bloody in their throats. The boy you went to school with who kissed you dizzy behind the old tin factory is holding a gun bigger than his body. You only leave home when home won't let you stay. No one leaves home unless home chases you away, fire under feet, hot blood in your belly. No one burns their palms under trains beneath carriages. You have to understand that no one puts their children in a boat unless the water is safer than the land. Unless the miles traveled means something more than a journey, a new life. No one crawls under fences. No one wanted to be beaten or pitied. No one chooses refugee camps or prisons. But prison is safer than a city of fire. No one could take it, no one could stomach it, no one's skin would be tough enough. They can't go home because home is the mouth of a shark, home is the barrel of a gun, and no one will leave home unless home chases you away.
Well, I'm sorry that didn't come through better than it did. I'm sorry about that. The last line, though, was a repeat of a middle line, which was, no one leaves home unless home drives you away. I retired from my clinical practice in Chicago in January 1st of this year in order to dedicate what I hope, of course, will be a long last lap to this work. It has been a community which has accepted me with open heart, and for the first time in as long as I can remember, has made me feel more human than I had ever felt before. Thank you very much.